Hello, everyone. Welcome to, I think, what is episode 18. We have Al back with us this week. Al, say hello to everybody.
Right. Episode 18. I'm excited.
You were missed last week.
Thank you.
Yes, by me and by the listeners as well.
By the way, I watched, of course. I edited it, but I loved the episode. It was a great episode. You talked all about porn stars.
Yeah. My favorite, I like refer to myself as like the nation's top porn scholar. And I feel like that video, or I hope that video was testament, to my knowledge in the area. So I'm glad that everybody enjoyed it. I'm glad that you approved, but I'm also equally glad that you're back this week.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, well, you know what? We picked a big week to kind of not talk because this past week, my hometown is basically on the verge of breaking out in civil war right now. It's pretty wild. So, and I feel like this is one of those things where I'm talking about it from like, my hometown, my perspective, but anybody who's, not from a big city probably can relate to this in one way or another, like sort of like hometown issues, so to speak. But there were two big things that happened. One was that there was a picture a picture circulating of these two girls who had like a black face mask on, and it said something to the effect of like, I'm an Alabama N-word, but like the actual word, and I want to be free. So really, really bad look. And one was Irish and one was Italian. And I'm like, why is it always exactly who you expect it to be?
Oh, like, yeah. Those were some white girls. Like, they were as white as could be.
Yeah. Which is like my hometown in a nutshell. Like we're like Caucasian, like to the max. But it was bad. And then I did some digging and I found out that it wasn't even the first racist incident with these two girls. That apparently there were like two other videos. And I also found out that they were bullying some disabled or some mentally handicapped, mentally disabled kid in the school. So
Jesus.
Yeah. It was not a shining moment, but I don't really want to get too much into that aspect on the podcast because this is a fun podcast. But then the other big, unfortunately, bigger issue in my town was, are we going to change the logo of the school, like the mascot of the school? So we're the Caldwell Chiefs, and right now, it's the Caldwell Chiefs debate of 2020. So,
like this is a problem in a lot of small towns and schools, because I am also from a small town called Mayapack, and their team name is the Indians. So and it's the same exact thing. They're going through the same problems. Some people want to change it, some people don't. And now this whole Redskins change it brings up the question.
Well, it brings the conversation to the forefront again. Yeah, this is like so funny. My official position is that I don't think that they have to necessarily change the name, because I don't think that Chiefs is the same as Redskins for obvious reasons. But I do think it would be nice if they just made it policy that while they're not going to change the name, nobody's allowed to come to the school in like a headdress or, trying to do like the war chant or in any other way, like disrespecting Native American culture. And I feel like that's like a good compromise, it's like keep the name, keep the logo, but just agree that going forward there's like a zero tolerance policy for any type of cultural appropriation of like Native, because honestly, like they've been through enough, like we in Caldwell don't need to traumatize them any further by like mimicking them on the football field. But I don't think that the school logo or the name has to change. That's just my opinion. So I don't know, but how do you feel?
I mean, that's a good middleman. But in reality, if it offends people, just fucking change it. I mean, why does it offend the person that's, the white guy that just likes the name? People are too attached.
Well, that's like a friend of mine from back home who is like heavily involved with like athletics, and he's like my family. Like his family has been in town for a while, so like the whole everything is like very near and dear to his heart. And I said to him, like, how would you feel if a town like Livingston, so Livingston is like a predominantly Jewish town, how would you feel if, Livingston had their mascot be like the Fighting Paesans. And then they were like, and then they were running around in like wife beaters and hitting each other with pizza paddles like on the sidelines. And that was like, their mascot. Like you would have a problem with it. You would be like, okay, this is
I kind of like that. That sounds like a funny idea. That we should do that.
I mean, yeah, it's fun. No, I mean, it is pretty hilarious. But it's like, my point is that like we as Italians are like, oh, what's the big deal? We only say that because nobody's ever done it to us. But I can guarantee you that if that happened in another town where that was their name and that's how they represented Italian culture, that people from my town would not be into it. So again, for me, it's like just to sort of keep the peace. It's like, okay, keep the name, but just agree that going forward, we're not going to like show up in some offensive like garb that we have no business wearing to begin with. But on a lighter note, when I was talking to my friend, I was reminded of the time when we were like, God, I must have been, he's a little bit older than me, but I was like 17. We were like at my house. My parents were away for the weekend. So I don't know if you can already tell where this story is going. So
up to no good, that's for sure.
Yeah, up to no good. Exactly. So we were like hooking up at my house and I hear my aunt come through the front door like gangbusters. And I'm like, oh my God, like I didn't know, like I jumped into action. So this is like a twofold problem because not only are we like we're hooking up, but we were also in the process of like rolling a joint. So it's like his pants are down. We have weed on the table. I'm 17. My aunt's coming through the front door. And
classic.
Yeah, and like in my mind, I'm like, okay, let me grab the weed to get rid of that, and then you pull up your pants. But meanwhile, I'm like typical woman-man situation. I'm like hiding the weed, and he's like, oh, what do I do? And I'm like, pull up your fucking pants. Like, let's start there. And then, so I was like, oh my God. So she came in, and then we both had to like, be like, oh, we were just whatever. But it was so obvious what was going on. I was like mortified. And then that was like for a while, that was like the only time I was caught. I thought that was the only time, but then I remembered a second time a couple years later, I was having sex with the guy that I was, with, and the maid walked in, like his house cleaner, like the cleaning lady. It was like, and it forgot, it was like 9 a.m. on a Sunday morning. Like who has their cleaning lady come at 9 a.m. on a Sunday morning? But yeah,
and she didn't knock?
No, she probably didn't really like. Well, no, what happened was the bedroom door was open, so it's not like she just busted in.
And better question is, why are you fucking at 9 a.m?
Right, correct. I'm not really like a morning. That's like always like the thing I tell a guy. Like the first time I spend the night with a guy, I wake up the next morning and I go, I'm not really a morning person, just so you know. But that never seems to like impede them wanting to get morning sex. So I'm like, okay, whatever. So, but yeah.
So a guy, morning sex is just, creme de la creme. They love it.
Yeah, apparently. But yeah, so we were having sex and it was like, and we had the door open, like not really thinking anything of it. And then all of a sudden I like hear her and she kind of like yelps and I turn around and I have to, to her credit, like she was very sweet. She actually shut the door. Like she did the polite thing and she shut the door behind her. And I like looked at the guy I was with and I was like, what the? And he was like, oh yeah, like whatever, just like carry on. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna carry on. Like now I'm like mortified. Like she just got a it was like, no. So twice. Have you ever been caught having sex though?
In a car one time. Someone knocked, asked him to move the car out of the driveway, and we were having sex in the car. And I'm not positive if they knew, but they probably knew.
Well, yeah, it's like the Titanic where the window's fogging up. Like, they must have known.
Definitely, but it was very quick. They just looked in real quick, knocked, and we were startled, and I was like, oh, sorry, I'll move it now. And okay. So I'm not sure if they actually saw anything, but I'm pretty sure they saw everything.
Well, they're a homie, though, for just, like, carrying on and, like, not trying to,
not making a big deal out of it, definitely, just like the maid.
Yeah. My God, yeah, so I've been caught, I've been, visually caught, I guess you could say twice, and then, audibly, I don't know, I can be kind of loud I can be kind of loud in general, but I can be kind of loud during sex, that's my toxic trait, I just can't, there's no such thing as like silent sex for me. So I can't imagine how many people have heard me having sex. I'm sure that number is a lot bigger.
I don't get people that have silent sex. It doesn't make sense to me. And I when I was with roommates and I would have, sex with a woman, I am very loud myself, and the person was also making some noise. And every single time, my roommates always had a joke about it. They always had to make fun of the noises coming out of my room. And what's so funny about that?
Oh my God. Well, I'm the same way. I'm like, what is the big deal? Like, what's going on. Also, like you said, like, who is silent when having sex? Like, not even
that's no fun.
Like, not even Republicans do that. Not even Republicans are silent during sex. Okay, so like, why are we being quiet? It's so weird to me.
Do you think Mitt Romney's not making noise?
No, I think Mitt Romney is like a freak.
He's making noise.
He's making noise for sure.
All right, yeah.
I mean, listen, even Trump.
What about Cheney's making noise?
Who? Dick Cheney?
Yeah, he's making noise.
He's making noise. Even Donald Trump, like as much as I can't stand him, I'm sure he's making noise. I don't think he's good in bed,
absolutely.
But I'm sure he's making noise.
Too much noise.
Probably, yeah. It's probably too much noise. You're right. But I don't know, man. Yeah, I've told you before. Like, I like a certain level being the key part of that phrase. A certain level of dirty talk. But even if like a guy is not comfortable with that, it's like, yeah, like there has to be some noise, background music, something. I just can't silently fuck someone. It's like, unless you're into like necrophilia, like fucking a dead person, I don't know who wants like silent.
I've heard of guys shushing the woman for making too much noise.
Oh yeah. Well, that's like, I mean, I guess if you have like your buddies outside, like if you said, if you have a roommate, it gets like kind of awkward, or like if you live with your parents, like, oh my God.
No, I'm talking about more of like a sexual fantasy. Like they prefer the woman to be quiet.
Yeah, but that's weird to me. Like,
that's very weird. Not just to you. That's a weird thing.
Like, I also like, I need an audible confirmation that I'm doing a good job. So like, if you're not making noise, like my thought is like, okay, he's not enjoying it. Like that's right.
Yes.
So I don't know.
I've had it the opposite, where I've made too much noise and they think they're hurting me.
Oh no.
Yeah, no, and I'm like, no, I'm just enjoying it. I'm just, vocal about it.
That's like nice of them to even like ask and check in, because I feel like once I get going, like I don't really care. Like I don't even really care if I'm hurting you. It's like, all right, just take it. Like I don't really. How bad could it really hurt? Mm-hmm. I feel like, because we're on like the hometown subject, I've been like talking about, or I've been teasing it, as you like to say. I've been teasing it for a while, but I want to finally set the record straight and tell the fire alarm story from high school.
The famous fire alarm story.
Fire alarm story. So when I was a freshman in high school, I was arrested for pulling the fire alarm. And it's a 3rd-degree felony offense. Nobody ever told me that. Like, I did not get the memo. But after 9/11, it like went up from like a misdemeanor charge to like a legit 3rd-degree federal offense, so a felony. And it was one of those things. Like freshman year can be rough. Freshman year is like prison. Like if you don't come in and have your prison gang down like stat or down pat, like you will end up being somebody's bitch. And I feel like freshman year of high school, is no different. Like if you don't have a crew of friends, it can be really rough. So I, at some point during the year, started hanging out with some rather unsavory characters. And I was hanging out in the library one day. And
what type of characters are we talking about here? We're talking potheads? We're talking about goths? What are you saying?
Just like wayward types, like
troublemakers.
Troublemakers for sure. People who were like a little bit lost in life. But there was this one kid, Kyle. Now, again, to set the record straight, Kyle and I never hung out outside of school. I would only see him in school during my lunch period. And Kyle basically looked like the real life version of Eric Cartman from Southpark. Like just sort of like a rotund, like with the hair and the hat. That was like Kyle. And one day we're all chilling in the library and he's saying that he doesn't want to go to his next class, so somebody should pull the fire alarm. So I'm like, so I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. Like, that's dumb. And he was like, come on, like, the worst that can happen to you is you get, like, in school suspension. And I'm like, no, I'm not pulling the fire alarm. That's dumb. So then they start throwing books at the fire alarm to try to get it to go off. And me, in my head, Mrs. Like, I always have to prove everybody wrong. I get up and I say, this is stupid and a waste of time. And then I just pull the fire alarm for them. So just
Wow.
to recap, in my brain, it wasn't like, oh, don't pull the fire alarm because that's a bad thing and you're going to get in trouble. In my brain, I go, see, I'm so much smarter than these people who are so inefficient. Let me just get up and do the work like I always do. So I don't know what kind of psychological issue that is, but I'm sure there's a psychiatrist out there somewhere who could delve into,
Because I was going to say, this is not something Bri would usually do. She's not a troublemaker. She doesn't want to do things that'll get her in trouble like this. But,
No.
There's another reason for it, so it makes sense.
It was just it was like a lapse in judgment. Like, that part of the story is really not interesting. I think everybody thought there was like some big reason behind it, and there wasn't. It's just like, nope, I'm just a regular run-of-the-mill dumbass. So I pull the fire alarm, everybody evacuates, and a little while later, our vice principal comes over, and he's like, take a walk with me. So we go, and before he even gets the words out, he was like, some people are saying you pulled, and I was like, I pulled it, and he's like, you pulled it, and I'm like, yep, I pulled it. And he was like, are you sure you pulled it? And I'm like, I definitely pulled. It was like that scene in My Cousin Vinny where he's like, you shot the clerk, and the guy's like, I shot the clerk, and then you shot the clerk. It was like that level of like, he was like, okay, this girl's like, he probably felt bad that I wasn't even putting up a fight. He was like, oh, Jesus Christ. So he walks me to the front of the building, which at this point in time, like 80% of the student body has been evacuated out onto the front lawn, right? So we now have an audience for Act 2 because everybody's out there, like students, faculty, the whole 9 yards. And he walks me out, and the school SRO officer, which you know what that is, right? Like, it's like the police officer who hangs out in the school.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was like pounding some Jameson. We walk out, the SRO officer is there, and he is like all fired up. Like, he has been training for this moment his whole, like, since the academy. Like, he is so excited to just fucking apprehend somebody. He was way too enthusiastic, in my opinion. And his name is Officer Joy, which is kind of ironic because if you've ever been in trouble with the law, joy is not the first emotion that springs up in your body when you're dealing with a police officer. It was like Marie Kondo. Like, this does not spark joy. Like, that's not the feeling I'm getting right now. But that was his name. And he's like, getting ready to arrest me. And then like Mr. Brown, the VP, being a sweetheart, is like, oh, like, can't we just deal with this internally? And he's like, nope, I got to take her in. So then he handcuffs me in front of the whole school. Like, I can hear like an audible gasp, from the student body. I'm like, great, here we go.
That seems like a pretty, like, too much. Handcuffs?
I know.
Criminal.
And he also handcuffed me. Now, like, when you arrest a minor, I learned this after the fact. When you arrest a minor, you're supposed to handcuff them in the front instead of the back. Like, you know what I mean? So that's not like too traumatizing, I guess. Who knows? But that's like the rule. So he handcuffed me behind my back, put me in the squad car. I wasn't even dressed nice that day, which also upset me. It's like, if you're going to be like the center of attention at school, you at least, even if it's for something bad, you at least want to look good. I had on like Sophie sweatpants, like a baggy, gross, my hair was all tied up. It was disgusting.
You looked like a hoodlum.
I looked like a hoodlum. So he handcuffed me, he perp walked me. We're on our way to the police station, and all of a sudden I hear this like hysterical yelling, and I look to my left, and my mother, who I don't even know how she managed to find out, but at like this soon, my mother is like out of her car, outside the police car, like yelling at the intersection. She's like, where are you taking my daughter? Like, what happened?
Oh my God.
And he was just like, like Mr. Stoic was like, police station. So my mother is hysterical. In my head, I'm like, oh my God. Like, now I know I'm really fucked. Now that I see how upset my mother is, like, again, Sicilian parents, I'm like, I fucked up. So we go to the police station. They take me in. They process me. I really skeeved the holding cell, and I just want everyone to know. There was like boot prints on the wall. It was like not very clean. It was just disgusting. Like it was like the most.
I've been in a holding cell once. There's like scratches and dirt everywhere.
Yes.
Makes you think who was in here before.
Yeah, I'm like, is this a scare tactic? Like, did somebody really do this, or did they do this? So it's like the scared straight. Like you're like, oh my god, like what the fuck happened in here? It was like a padded cell. They had like shit everywhere. So I was like very concerned. And then they come in, they process me, they have to ask you all these questions. And, I'm trying to give like, I'm trying to lighten the mood and find the humor in the situation, being like the comic that I am. And, I'm giving him all these witty answers, and he is like not amused, Can't win them all. Can't win them all. But then finally they process me, they release me to my parents, which honestly, when I saw the look on my father's face, I wanted to turn in and be like, can you just keep me in the holding cell? Because that is probably safer than going home with my father right now. And I remember later that night, I called a friend to tell them what happened. And my dad and I like made a joke, again, making light of the situation. And he was like, do you think this is funny? Like, do you think this is funny, Brianna? And I was like, oh my God. And I was like, a little, but whatever. Meanwhile, back at school, the rumor mill is turning, like typical small town. Like everybody's got some shit to say. And my cousin, who's the same age as me, was there. So she was fielding all of the craze, like the rumors. So a few of my favorites were, one was this chick tried to tell everybody that she sold me oregano instead of weed, and I smoked it with her. Now, this is insulting on two levels. One, I'm Italian, so if you don't think I know my fucking spices and I don't know oregano when I see it, then you're wrong. But second of all, you never ever smoked me up, so do not tell people that I smoked oregano with you. That's
and I don't
number
get the point of the story. She's trying to look cool, saying she sold you oregano, but then she's saying that she smoked it as well.
Right.
So I don't know what she's trying to say there.
I know. So that was like the first thing. I definitely smoked weed back in high school, but it was never with her, and it was never fucking oregano. Like, Jesus Christ. So that pissed me off to this day. And then another guy, it was like after the arrest and like people were all talking, my cousin said that she overheard some guy go, wasn't that the girl who wore the eye patch in elementary school?
Oh, no.
And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, 9 years later, I pull the fire alarm and I'm still known as the girl who wore the eye patch in elementary school. Like, it could just never, like, I could become Pablo Escobar and be running drugs all up and down, the eastern seaboard, and some asshole from high school would still be like, "What, didn't she wear the eye patch?" It's like, okay, come on. So I'll never be losing that. And then the other one, which like to this day cracks my cousin up, is when somebody was like, yeah, I heard she comes from a bad family. And I was like, my family is crazy, but my family is not a bad family. But even so, like when I heard that, I felt like it was like Mulan. Like I dishonored the family. Like I was like, oh my God, like I'm so embarrassed that I did this. So,
it's good that you spice things up, because it sounds like your family's full of nice people that do nice things. So it's cool that you added a little story to the storyline.
Oh yeah, I don't think they felt the same, but the other rumor that cracked me up was then everybody said that, or not everybody, but some people were saying that they found cocaine in my locker. Like I was like moving weight at James Caldwell High School, and I was like, I appreciate that you even think that I have the skill set to do such things, but I can assure you I don't. Like, I couldn't even cheat on a test. I was so nervous.
All these things are way more badass than just pulling the fire alarm.
Right.
Pulling the fire alarm is like something a kid did in like a 90s sitcom.
Yeah, it's like not like pulling the fire alarm is like, it's not good, but it was not like a big deal. But yeah, everybody was like, trying to hype it up. So on the one hand, I thank you for thinking I'm that badass, but it really was not that crazy. So I don't even remember how my mother like convinced them to do this, but I ended up going back to the police station to take another mugshot before I went to court, which is not like normally they don't do that. Normally you go in, you get arrested, you take your mugshot, get processed, go home, whatever. But my mother managed to convince them to let me take a second mugshot, which was great because my roots, I had blonde hair at the time and my roots were growing out.
Really?
Yeah. It looked disgusting. It was like before that look was in, like the overgrown roots. So
I would love to see you blonde. I can't even imagine that.
Oh yeah, it was a dark time in my life. I was very Jersey. I had like chunky blonde highlights. Like I was, I wanted to be that person. I was pulling fire alarms, like the whole thing, But yeah, my mom managed to convince them to let me come back to take my mugshot.
What a good mother.
Yeah, she is a good mom after I got my roots done. So thank you, Mom, for, for letting, for convincing them to let me come back and take my mugshot.
What was the second mugshot better?
What?
Was the second mugshot better?
Yeah, the second mugshot was better because I had my roots done. So it was like, it didn't look like.
Okay, I see what you're saying. All right.
It looked good. And I remember when I was going back to take it.
Do you still have the mugshot today?
I mean, I don't have it personally, but I'm sure it's somewhere.
But
I remember when I was going to take it too, my father was like, look remorseful. And I was like, how the fuck do I look remorseful? And he was like, just look sad. He was like, look sad.
He's right. The worst like celebrity mugshots are the one where they're kind of smiling or happy.
They look arrogant. Yeah, I did not want that. So I wound up having to go to court over the whole thing because, again, third-degree federal offense. There was like a glimmer of hope that they were going to like kick it down to a lesser court. But of course, like Bri Hunter is fucked. They're like, nope, you got to show up at the Superior Court of Newark. I'm like, great. So I had to buy this like Hillary Clinton pantsuit to go to court. I had it kept it for a long time because I'm like, oh, in case I got to go to traffic court, I should just hold on to it. It was this gray pantsuit. Like, I'm like, oh my God, it looked like I was running for office. And I went to court and I actually ended up getting off pretty easy because Mr. Brown, the vice principal, wrote me a letter of a letter basically asking the judge for leniency, saying that I was a good kid, it was a one-time mistake, and to please, go easy on me, that he had faith that I would, that I would make this right and be a good kid. And I don't know if most people, I mean, everybody I went to high school with knows about the fire alarm, but I don't think most people know about Mr. Brown writing the letter. But that letter really did sort of save me from any worse punishment than I got, which ended up being like, community service. It was nothing. So
there we go. You made it out. You looked like the badass at school, and you got away with it.
And I was okay. But
maybe it wasn't Mr. Brown. Maybe it was your gray pantsuit that did it for them.
I wish. She specifically referenced the letter. Otherwise, I wouldn't know. She said to me, she's like, in my 20-something years of being a judge, I've never seen a vice principal write a letter, asking for leniency. And I've talked to you about Mr. Brown before. Unfortunately, Mr. Brown passed away earlier this year. It was very sad. And I wanted to tell this story earlier, but it got kind of, I didn't know how to handle it, because it was so fresh and it just sucked losing somebody that young. But
there's a few people in high school that really touch you, that really, leave an impression on you. And he was one of them, right?
Well, let's not say touch. Let's not use the word.
Yeah, that could be bad.
In this day and age, let's not use the word touch. Let's just say he inspired. Yeah, he was inspiring. He cared. He left an impression on me, very much so. And I tried to I remember I was describing him to you before, and I said that he kind of looked like Sylvester Stallone's character in the movie Antz. Remember, he was like the soldier ant, and that's what Mr. Brown looked like. I guess he looked like Stallone because the ant looked like Stallone. He had like this strong jaw, good-looking dude. I don't know that he was in the Marines, but he was he had that tough guy look and mentality about. He was sweet, but he also had that side to him that was very buttoned up. And I feel honestly he would have loved that. If he knew I was comparing him to Stallone, that would have made his day. So, Mr. Brown, wherever you are, I'm saying it publicly that you definitely had the Sylvester Stallone-esque look about you. So,
from Antz specifically.
100%. But yeah, that's the fire alarm story. So I don't know. I feel like that's it definitely was not the most exciting thing that happened at my school, but it's probably up there, historically.
Definitely. Is that something that you and your family still talk about?
Oh yeah. Now it's we can kind of joke about it, but for the first couple years, it was not a funny topic. Not to my father. He was not happy about it. He also had to pay money for a lawyer, which is like, however
Oh,
disappointed he was in me getting arrested, he was twice as mad about the money that it cost him to hire a lawyer. So for many, many years, we could not joke about it. But now it's like whatever.
yeah. One time I threw a house party in my dad's house, and that's something I don't think I ever talked about again with him. I think that's just something we swept under the rug.
He was mad about it.
Oh yes, because the police came. There was over 100 students there, and in the same weekend, I crashed his car. And I'm telling you, I'm a nice kid. I'm a good kid. I don't do shit like that. So it was very surprising one weekend where I just had a house party and crashed his car. He was not happy about it, and like I said, we swept that under the rug.
I mean, well, the crashing of the car, I don't think it's, you see, like, you should have led with crashing the car. You said, oh, I had a house party and my dad was mad. And
Surprisingly,
I'm like,
the house party thing was worse.
oh my God. Well, my brother once had like a rager and the police showed up, and it was like another thing that my poor parents were like, there was some chick who passed out in the bathroom and they had to call the EMTs because they weren't sure, like, like to their credit, they, instead of being worried about getting in trouble, they were like, no, we have to call the paramedics to make sure she's okay. They didn't hesitate, which makes me proud, but nonetheless, they had to call the EMTs. The EMTs came in, they took the bathroom door off the hinges so
Oh
they
my
could
god!
get the stretcher in there. And then,
See, you're the good kid. You're not doing shit like that.
well, you know what? It's funny because it's like typical. Like my mom prides herself on being so progressive, but they were typical. Like she's a typical Italian mom in the sense that like my brothers could run wild in the streets, and then like meanwhile me, like I had to be like every little thing I did, I got in trouble. But my brother was arrested once for breaking into the town pool and like skinny dipping. Then he had the rager. Like my brother did all kinds of stuff. They were like playing beer pong at his high school graduation. Everything was just like, oh, it's whatever, whatever. But meanwhile, me, it's like I watched lesbian porn once and you catch me and it's like grounded, grounded,
Well, yeah, you're
grounded.
daddy's little girl, and you're also the firstborn, right?
Yeah, it's that.
Yeah, so it's gonna happen.
I know. I never thought I would be the black sheep of my family, but it kind of is shaping up that way. So
No.
before we end, I do want to do like a quick UFC recap because we had UFC fights this weekend, and I know you and I were talking about whether or not I wanted to keep it. For now, we're going to keep it in the podcast. We're going to kind of do like every time there's a fight, I'm going to do a recap at the end of the podcast, and then eventually I might make it a separate series in and of itself. But for now, it's going to fall under the Bri Hunter is fucked umbrella.
There we go.
But yeah, but we'll do it towards the end, and that way, like, if any of our listeners are really like not into UFC, you can just ditch. But for those of you who are, it'll be here. So
And for people at home, I am not into UFC at all, so I'm with you out there. I don't know what the hell she's talking about, but I'm gonna listen and see
don't
what's
know.
going on.
you don't know what's going on. I know this
Nope.
is like I like thought of sending you some notes, and I'm like, honestly, what's the point? I may as well tell it to you from the perspective of other people who don't pay attention.
There we go.
So UFC Fight Island 3, this was the last series of fights for now on Fight Island. They're on their way back to Vegas, so it should hopefully be business as usual. But it was like the Fight Island finale, which I have to just say that I was one of those people who was making fun of Dana White when he was like, oh, I'm going to buy an island and we're going to have fights there. I was like, okay, this guy's out. He's like Kanye West. Like he's outside of his mind. But I'll be damned, the man pulled it off. And it went well. Like it worked.
He looks like a genius compared to these MLB players and owners and
Yeah.
Cashman and whatnot.
Well, we talked about it on the last podcast, how it was like, the difference between the NBA bubble and then like like the UFC island, which was like they were putting them up in Abu Dhabi, which is like a very ritzy town to begin with. Like they were treated like kings and queens over there. And then you look at the NBA bubble and it's like this like welfare bubble. You're like, holy shit. So yeah, not only did he do it, but he did it well. So I have to eat a piece of humble pie and take back all the, the things I said about him being crazy. The one
Well,
thing
he still might be crazy. That's up for debate.
well, yeah. I mean, geniuses often are. But no, this fight, the other thing worth noting is Paul Felder was there. He's one of the announcers. He's really good. So he was broadcasting. He was originally kept out because he was sitting next to somebody who had coronavirus on the plane over. So they had to pull him out of commentating until the very last one, which is sucky because I really like him. But then also Michael Bisping and John Anik were also not there this weekend. So, I never, because I don't really watch sports, because this is like the first sport that I'm really into, I didn't realize that not having your favorite commentators does make a difference.
Absolutely.
So,
especially when it's something like the Super Bowl, and you got Joe Buck, commentating the thing.
Oh, is he? You don't like him?
No, he's not great. He seems like a fine person, but his, commentating skills aren't great.
Oh, I didn't know. I don't know because I don't pay attention to football, so I don't. But I'm assuming it's the same, feeling where it's not that the people who replaced them were bad. It's just that I like my guys, and when they weren't there, it was like a noticeable difference. Like if Paul Felder wasn't there, I probably would have just, done what my grandfather did and watched it on mute and just, because I was like,
There's people that will watch baseball games specifically with the radio programming and mute the television, sound and watch the game on TV with the radio broadcast.
Mm-hmm. My grandfather's one of those people, so he and again, I always thought that was crazy, and now I'm like, no, I get it. Like if your guys aren't on, it's like a different experience. So the truth of the matter, the fight was like the main card was very good in comparison to like the last round of fights, which was like kind of disappointing. The thing that I was laughing about was like the biggest, the thing was most talked about from the night was the drama between Herb Dean and Dan Hardy. So Herb Dean, he's a former fighter, but he's been a referee, for I think they said over 20 years now. So he's been at it for a while. He's very well respected. Dan Hardy is a commentator, also a former fighter. So this happened in the prelims. So I didn't even see it because I only watched the main card. But during the prelims, it was the Trinaldo versus Herbert fight, and Herbert was knocked out, and he was on the ground. And normally when somebody gets knocked out, they stop the fight right away. But what I learned, because again, I'm kind of new to the sport, is that like depending on how somebody gets knocked out and which way they fall and what they do when they fall determines whether or not you're going to stop the fight. So if somebody falls after getting punched, but they're in the defensive position, the official usually assumes like, oh, they're still conscious and they're willing to put up, a fight, therefore I shouldn't stop. It's like a huge gray area. You're sort of damned if you do or damned if you don't, whatever. So what ends up happening is the guy gets, he falls back, he gets knocked out. Herb Dean doesn't stop the fight, and Dan Hardy, who was supposed to be a color commentator ringside, yells out, "Stop the fight," which is a big no-no. Like in UFC, like if you're not, you can't just yell out, "Stop the fight." That's not your job.
I'd do that all the time if I was there.
Yeah. Well, but you're not ringside.
Just like if I went at a newspaper, what do you call it? A newspaper building, I would say stop the presses every day.
I know. You'd be like, stop. Well, listen, and I would like say to my team, like, I'm such a pussy bitch. I'd be like, if I go down, like immediately stop the fight. That's me. Mm. But this is something that I see a lot of UFC fans debating all the time is like, early stoppage versus like not stopping soon enough. So I think it's a gray area for a lot of these people, because if you stop a fight too early, people are pissed. But if you stop a fight too late, somebody could get seriously hurt or God forbid, die. So it was kind of odd though that Dan Hardy, who again is supposed to be like a commentator, yelled out, stop the fight. Like, I think his heart was in the right place, but like, I don't know that you should be doing that as a commentator. Like,
Why? What's the problem? He's just expressing his emotion. What's the problem here?
Well, that's the other thing I was going to bring up. Because there are no fans, like the fighters and everybody inside the octagon can hear what the commentator's saying. Normally,
oh, that's interesting.
Right? So, and that's like a thing that I think a lot of these sports teams are going to have to deal with if their commentators are ringside or courtside or on the, on the sidelines or whatever, is that normally you can't hear these people because there's so much noise from the fans. But now, because they're playing fanless or they're fighting fanless, whatever, you can actually hear what people on the side are saying. So throughout the broadcast, I would see I would see commentators kind of lower their voice or start to whisper, and that's why, because they don't want to distract the person in the octagon. And I was laughing because I'm like, I'm so goddamn loud. I could never. Like, I give them credit for lowering their voice because it's like I can't be quiet while commentating and I can't be quiet during sex. Like, I would fail. I would fail at either of those jobs. But that's part of the problem. And so that's what the referee said. He's like, it's not like it was a fan yelling out, stop the fight. Like, it's a quiet fight. There's not a lot of people, here. And the only people who should ever be yelling, stop the fight, are the physician or the fighter's team who know him or her and know that if they're on the ground, like, they sort of know their habits. And if they're on the ground, they're not moving, they know when to call the fight. So he felt like, Dan Hardy was out of line. So... And it's funny because it was a great card, but as I'm going through the MMA or the UFC blogs, it's like the main thing everybody is talking about is sort of this tiff. Because after the fight stopped, they had words ringside, which again is not really a good look to have them yelling at each other during a live broadcast. But,
Any chicks on this card? That's my favorite part. I love the chicks.
I'm sorry, say it again. What'd you say?
The lady fighters. Any lady fighters?
There was lady fighters. I hate to say it, like, I didn't really, their fight this time around wasn't really exciting to me. It was good, but it wasn't exciting. Like, last card, Amanda Ribas fought, and that was like an exciting thing for me to watch. Or whenever like Rose Namajunas fights, like, that's something I pay attention to. The more I get into it, the more I find myself following or being interested in specific fighters and specific bouts. So this time around, no disrespect, but I didn't really pay attention to the lady fighters.
Say to me, give me a lady amateur match over a top build event for the men's. I love watching ladies fight. So much better.
Well, listen, they're tough as shit. I feel like a lot of the times women don't get the respect they deserve in sports, but women MMA fighters are, they can kick ass. They can kick ass like of most of the guys that I know. So they 100% deserve people's attention and respect.
And it adds a little zest. It adds a little flavor to the whole thing. We've seen guys fight a million times. It's the same opinion with stand-up comedy for me. Anytime I see a whole lineup of just dudes, I get a little pissed off. I want to see some gals.
You're not into it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's like another thing too, is that like for people who are not naturally into watching or naturally excited by combat sports, I think the draw is the personality of the fighter. So if a fighter, has a big personality, is kind of like a showman, he's exciting, he's trash talking, like he has a big personality, that always draws people. And on this fight card, I'm gonna butcher the name because you know how I get, but it's so bad. I'm gonna butcher it, even though I could literally describe him to like a crime artist if I had to like describe what he looked like. But his name is, I'm gonna say Chimaev. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's such a sin. But like whoever
I'm sure you were so close, Bri.
I know what he looks like. He fights out of Sweden. I could mimic his voice, but I cannot pronounce his name. And that's my second toxic trait.
Thank God you can mimic the voice.
Yeah. But he's the guy who's always out there, like, he'll be like, I'll smash you. Like, he's very like that's like his frame because he speaks broken English. I always hear about commentators or people who are into UFC talk about somebody dominating in the ring. And I feel like I learned what that really meant when I watched this guy fight. He got in the ring, he pummeled the other guy, and when he got him on the ground, it's like the guy just had no way out. Like, that's like, now I'm like, oh, when you say dominant fighter, like, now I understand what you mean. It's just like he got in there, the other guy didn't even have a chance. As soon as they were on the ground, it's like whatever way he turned, it was like you were meeting the guy's fist or leg. It was incredible. And he has so much energy. He's like a spider monkey. He's very exciting, great personality. And as a novice, like, viewer of UFC, I'm like, oh, this guy's a rising star. But it was confirmed by other people who were huge fans when they were like, this is somebody who you have to watch. So
right.
I know you're not into it, but going forward, if you see that this guy is fighting, it's definitely a fight.
I'll keep an eye out.
Yeah. And then, of course, the biggest fight was the Till versus Whitaker fight. And Whitaker won, Till lost. But they were super... You don't... Like, in UFC, it's either, like, you have, like, a terrible, terrible rivalry where you just hate each other, or there's, like, a level of respect. And these dudes are both so loved because they're very respectful in general, but also of each other. And after the fight, even though Till lost, he was like congratulating Whitaker, and I think it was something that like a lot of the fans appreciated seeing, that they were so respectful of each other. But I still really like Darren Till, and I think that even though he lost this fight, he's such a hard worker that I think we have a lot more to see from him going forward. And he's also the guy that walks out to Sweet Caroline, which is like, what a good dude,
That's cute.
Yeah, what a fucking jam. Like
a little done though. It's been done.
You think it's over? Yeah, but he's from I think he's from Wales. I could be wrong.
It's like playing Don't Stop Believin', we've heard it. Go on.
But you have to remember that in UFC, a lot of the walkout songs are like, like hip hop or like AC/DC, like very bro-y, intense songs. And then this guy walks out and it's like Sweet Caroline, and you're like, fuck yeah. Like you're like 3 rounds into the bar. Like that's like my favorite feeling. And Sweet Caroline
it's like
comes
Homer
on.
Simpson. Homer Simpson came out to Why Can't We Be Friends?
Oh my, yeah, it was a lot like that. I mean, I would like to think he's tougher than Homer Simpson, but it's the same type of emotion that comes up.
There we go.
So yeah, so I think that's basically, I don't want to get too technical yet, but in the future I will. But no, I'm basically like me in UFC right now. It's like I am like a sponge. I'm watching old fights. I'm watching, video, like how-to videos, like learning the basic moves. I'm watching documentaries on the history of UFC or Pride fighting. Pride came before UFC. I'm like ODing on MMA right now. So whatever I'm lacking right now in terms of commentary, give me a month and I will be like an expert on the subject.
You'll be like Joe Rogan.
I will be like Joe Rogan, but with better hair and better boobs. So
I hope so. Joe Rogan's got some good boobs, though.
He does have some serious pecs. But watch out, Joe Rogan, because this big-tittied brunette is coming for you. No, I'm just kidding. No, but it's been good. It's been keeping me entertained through the quarantine. We're at almost 50 minutes, so we went a little bit over than we normally go, but I think this is a wrap for this week. Do you have any closing notes, any closing arguments, Al?
Not at all, because I gotta find out my fantasy football draft pick right now, so I'm ready to wrap this up.
Oh yes, fantasy football. You know what? We are over time, but next week we'll touch on the whole fantasy football fascination next week.
Oh, I'll get into it. I love getting into it.
But I wish you the best of luck. Any of our listeners who are participating in fantasy football, I also wish you the best of luck as well. And until next week, guys, the twins and I and Al love you very much.